Councilmember King.
Here.
Councilmember Moreno. Councilmember Jeruso.
Yeah.
Councilmember Morel. Councilmember Harris. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. I make a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting. Properly second by Councilmember Morel. Any objections? Hearing none. Motion is properly approved. Motion is approved. At this time, we're gonna ask if it's fine with our presenters, item number 3, if we could do items number 4, 5, 6. It's going to be very fast, just a voting matter. I want to get members of the administration in and out so they can take care of the city's business. So we're going to have presenters from number 4, 5, and 6. Is Richard, is she available? Huh? All right, number 5, Acadian Ambulance, come on up. Huh?
Yeah.
There's no presentation? Okay. I don't have any questions. All right. Well, let's do this. Number 4, the discussion and vote on Sev1 contract. Just vote on it. All right, so at this time, make a motion to approve the contract, this proposed agreement between the City of New Orleans and Sev1 Tech LLC. I make a motion. Second by Councilmember Moreno. 5 yeas, no nays. Contracts approved. Second is a vote for contract with, well, the proposed agreement between the City of New Orleans and Acadian Ambulance Service. Make a motion to approve. Second by Council President Morel. 4, 5 yeas, no nays. And lastly is a agreement between the City of New Orleans and Water Tech. Properly motion by myself, second by Councilmember Harris. All right, 5 yeas, no nays. Believe that is it for the contracts in the city. All right.
I would like to move that those items be added to the consent agenda.
I second. Okay, no need to vote. No need to vote. All right. So at this time, we're going to have a presentation from A+ Advocacy.
Okay, just watch each other.
While they're setting up and setting up their presentation and signing up, just want to let everyone know how we got here. Although we all know that the city council and the school board are 2 different entities with different authorities, I think that it's important that the council still hear from our school advocates, because our schools affect everyone in this city. So I had no problem, and actually it's proud to have them come before us and make their presentation. And my plan is to have this body hear from this organization more often throughout the years to come. So at this time, I'll turn the meeting over to a representative from Ms. Aretha Lewis from A+ Advocacy, or whoever you have to start it off.
Hi, thank you for having us present. We appreciate it because we really would like to talk about education and how it impacts everything. But we're here to ask that education be its own standalone committee. And because we really think there needs to be a focus on education in the city of New Orleans.
Good morning. I will echo those sentiments. I do know that you guys know me well enough to know that I believe everything begins and ends with education. I believe that if you want to affect or impact juvenile crime specifically, you have to address the inequities that are in our schools. The case that is most prominent right now is the unfortunate death of Linda Fricky. You do know what time of day that crime happened. You do know that not one person was aware that those children were not in school. It was the middle of the day. The grandmother to one of those children reached out to me personally after she disparaged the children on social media because she was not aware that her granddaughter was one of the four. And what she said to me was, the mother sent her to school. We had no idea that she was roaming the street at that time of day. So there's a dropping of the ball on every level. Specifically, when we want to just blame parents, we have to understand that parents and schools and communities are to work holistically together to ensure that children have everything that they need. And when we talk about quality of life, I believe it begins and ends with equality education. The reason I believe that we need a standalone committee for education is because the New Orleans public school system has abdicated their duty. They do not want to govern or run schools. So that means we're leaving our children in the hands of CMOs whose only objective is to profit from the miseducation of our children. We have a $6 billion experiment that is going on with our children. And if anything needs to be investigated, is where those dollars are going, because they're not making them in the hands of the most marginalized community, our children. New Orleans has a huge Black population, and somehow our Black children are making their way to the most egregious schools, the ones with no resources, no educators who are trained, no mental health professionals who are trained. And all of that is because nobody, and I mean nobody, is concerned about the well-being of our most prized possessions, which is our children. We can't talk about a living wage if you can't talk about education. We can't talk about affordable housing if you can't talk about education. We cannot talk about crime if you're going to ignore education. I had the pleasure of going to Chicago recently and seeing those people fight for their children, because there's a mayor's race going on right now in Chicago, and Paul Vallis is trying to run the city of Chicago. We all know what he did to the city of New Orleans. And I wish that our leaders here could have reached out to the leaders there and say, you do not want him in your city because look at what he did to ours. 72% of our children are not reading on grade level. 60% of them are suffering from diagnosed unaddressed trauma. More than 50% of our schools are D's and F's, and I'm talking about by their calculations, because we all know a 46% is nowhere near a C, but that is what they get to say to our families. We're growing. Growth and proficiency are not the same, which is why we need to have a standalone committee. We need to have eyes on our schools. We need to have people who are invested in our children. We're here to make a presentation, but everything that we're telling you, you already know. Cynthia Hedge-Morrell thought it was important enough to have a standalone committee. We see how that turned out. Everything that it impacted, it increased, it got better, it improved. So look no further than her and what she did for this community with a standalone committee. You cannot fold education into anything else as if it's an afterthought. It's the only thought. It is the premier thought. It is the first thought. Children are dying because they're uneducated. Children are killing because they're miseducated. And everybody's getting wealthy and moving back to their communities to enhance their communities, and they're leaving New Orleans struggling and in peril. I'm pleading with you. We don't need a presentation to tell you why this has to happen. Somebody has to ensure that the schools are doing what they're supposed to do for our children. No one is doing that. Our school board has told you they don't want the right to do that. We're asking you to give us that right to do that. And I'm not only talking as an educator, I'm talking as a parent. I have a 17-year-old Black son. My only goal in this life is to ensure that I leave this world better for him than I found it. You have people before you who are not paid to do the things that we're doing, and we put more hours caring about other people's children than most people care for other people's children. Our plea right now is to give us this committee, empower us to ensure that the checks and balances are in place for these schools. You don't have the time to oversee them, so let us do it for you. The school board doesn't want to do it, so let us do it for them. We have a $300,000 superintendent, and we can't tell you 300 things that have been done since she arrived here that are in the best interest of children. We're closing schools, giving them to perpetually failing charter schools. That's a recipe for disaster. But I'm going to yield because, you know, I can go.
So, thank you. And I think that most of us have been doing this fight for a long time. Some of you may remember United Students New Orleans, where children walked out of schools all across this city because they were asking for the same things we have children asking for now. I don't know if you're aware, but the majority of our schools do not have PE. They don't have hot lunches. They don't have libraries. A lot of them don't have books. They don't have certified teachers. A lot of them still operate with zero tolerance policies, even though we have it written in a state law that we're supposed to be doing restorative justice. And I know because at that time I was working with Families and Friends of Louisiana's incarcerated children, and we helped write some of that legislation around restorative justice. A lot of these things are not happening because we have 100% charter school system. And because of that, they have the autonomy. But what they don't have autonomy to do is break the law. And unfortunately, because we don't have accountability systems in place, we have nobody monitoring. We have nobody really walking through schools, making pop-up visits. Every day, I promise you, federal and state laws are being broken around disability, IEPs, 504s, evaluations, every day. The fact that No Lab could publish an article in 2016 saying, now this is coming from our school board, saying that 60% of our children are on the trauma spectrum and have PTSD, but not put therapists and institute therapeutic models to address that PTSD is actually illegal. Because when a child has a special need and you're aware of it, you have to evaluate and then create IEP plans. So how can 60% of our children, how can you publish that article and then not require a school standard where those children's needs are met? That is actually required under federal and state law. The fact that that's not happening across the board is not just a failure of our schools, it's a failure of our school systems, our system of systems, but it's a failure statewide and federally, which is also why SPLC is currently suing our state because of the constant discrimination against children with special needs. We have been sued multiple times and have yet to come under compliance for SPED regulations. But not only that, let's speak to the disparities, because everybody pretends like they don't know what the disparities are. We have maybe 6 good schools in this city. 75% of Caucasian children go to 6 schools. 75%. How is that possible when 85% of our school population is Black and brown? That doesn't even add up. How does that even make sense? How do we, and we have a one-app system, right? That's supposed to be blind, but are y'all aware that our one-app system asks for income, proof of income? I can't just type my income. I have to put in check stubs or proof of income. And if once you put the proof of income, they give you different lists. Our one-app system is racist in classes. Our children are more segregated than they were pre-Katrina. They have less resources than they have pre-Katrina, despite the fact that billions of state, federal, and philanthropy dollars went into this new system. Billions with the big B. So how is it that the majority of our kids are failing? They can't compete on a global or national level. They don't even get PE. We have a high spike in juvenile diabetes because they don't get PE. A lot of them get 15 minutes for recess and lunch. We don't have a standardized school calendar. So if you're missing work 1 week for one child, you may have to miss work the next week for the next child. And we've been promised this. And I can tell you as a parent, year after year, we were promised a standardized school calendar. Year after year, we were promised one way of getting our children in school that didn't discriminate. And I promise you, all the selective admission schools still have different days in which they test. And they do not publicize those widely if you're not checking their website. Discrimination is rampant. Lack of resources is rampant. And we cannot pretend that the income gap has nothing to do with equity to resources and education. When companies look at our city and they see we are the second highest for disparities and discrimination, that does not appeal and make them want to come and be a part of New Orleans' economy. We want to attract business. We want to have an employable population. We need to listen to the parents because the parents have been saying from the second we got back to the city after Katrina, what they wanted was quality schools. They wanted schools that provided everything they had, like auto mechanic, woodworking, home ec, they wanted that and more, and robotics and STEM, not less. So what parents got met with, I remember going to Carver, they had a nursery at Carver. I used to go there and teach parenting classes to the teen parents. They could go to school at Carver, drop off their children and get parenting classes. We have none of that. We have none of what we had. Plus we don't even have the extra that we're asking for. So, and all those promises were made over and over and over again to our parents. And the question becomes, why isn't anything of this coming to fruition? Who's holding charters accountable to implement the plans they said they had? And I sat in on those meetings and those promises were made to parents and community, but none of it came to fruition. And what happens is the schools open, they close, they open, they close. Right now, do y'all know that the only schools that have middle schools are those 5 schools I was talking about? White children get middle schools. Black children do not in this city. Audubon has a middle school. Plessy has a middle school. Lusher has a middle school. Yeah, I'm sorry.
You say middle school, was that a separate building?
Separate building, yes. So like there's Baby Lusher and then there's Live Oak Lusher where they have their middle school kids. Plessy has the school in a French Quarter and then they have Craig for their middle schoolers. So, I mean, the system disparities are so blatant. It's just, I don't even know. Anyway, all that to say, we definitely need a committee. We need checks and balances. We need school-wide standards. We need to tell people if someone else is coming to charter, there needs to be a standard of what you're going to put in our city. Okay, go ahead.
One of my sayings I always have said about, because the question always is city council doesn't have control over the schools, which is very obvious. My thing I always say is, but you have a platform. And President Morrell knew I told him that to his face one time. So the thing is, a lot of things are not being told to the public or explained to the public because it's on such a small platform. So even if the platform is, they have to be called to the carpet to be asked, hey, Dr. Avis, why is it Crescent City is being allowed to close Acadian Academy, which is a failing school, and merge children into another failing school, which people might not know that they're literally merging 2 failing schools. So she failed the school and she's been rewarded by merging to another failing school. And those are kids and families that are being shuffled. People don't know that because it's on such a small scale. So this is where people can be called to the carpet and then they can get an understanding of the types of moves that are being made that they're not understanding, but they're feeling, if that makes sense.
I mean, we've given you everything that we feel is imperative that you know. So before we take questions from you, I will have you know that Stanford produced a 72-page study that told us that our schools are stratified by race and class. So when you ask us why this is important, because this experiment targeted us because of the demographics of our community. It is predominantly harming Black children. That has been proven by the legislative auditor, who said that the system is not a system of choice, it's a system of chance. Even though they promised us that you can pick the school your child goes to, you don't have to be relegated to failing buildings and poor teaching practices, but that's all they've given us in our schools. So we're asking you to give us the opportunity that nobody else seems to want. And that is the opportunity to ensure that all children have a fighting chance so that they don't have to turn to crime to be able to feed themselves and house themselves, because the foundation of education would already have been laid because we care about our children. So at this time, if you have any questions for us, we're more than willing to answer them, but we've given you statistically why it's important for this committee to stand alone. And if nothing else, it does not need to be bunched up with a whole bunch of other crises. Because if you separate it and you address crime, then by nature, you'll address the other issues that we're suffering from in this community. So thank you for giving us an opportunity to be heard.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Wyatt, and other presenters. This time, Council Vice President Moreno has a question. Has the floor.
Thank you, Chairman King, and good morning to all of you. Yeah, I heard what you said, and we hear it often, that, hey, the city council, you don't have control over schools and, kind of stay in your lane. Yet at the same time, we're providing several $1 million to schools through HARAs. And we also, took the lead on the ECE millage as well. And so with that being said, I really do think that Councilmember Morel, the previous one, actually had it right, because it's about collaborating and finding solutions.
Mm-hmm.
It's about having an education committee, I think, would create a path for us to work together better. So often we hear about issues with our schools in the news. And then we're all watching just to see what's going to happen, next with the school board and how that issue is going to be addressed. But if there was another avenue to bring everybody to the table to say, well, how could we help you all resolve this issue? I think that would be worthwhile. And, we get so bogged down on and caught up on so many things that are happening that it's so critical and important for the public to bring ideas that move us forward to us. And that's exactly what I believe you're doing today.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying, what's a good path and a good way to improve our overall educational system in New Orleans, to improve the situation for kids, to improve the situation in particular for Black children in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see why it wouldn't be a benefit to all of us to have an education committee here in the city council. And once again, it would be another opportunity for all of us to understand what's happening with our kids, how we as a city council can help, not to take, of course, control away from the school board. That's not where our authority lies, but how we can best help problem solve, get solutions done, potentially help with implementation. And also, I think this is an important piece as well, how we can all work together to go to Baton Rouge, to the legislature, to ask all together as one unified voice, what our kids here in New Orleans need. So thank you. I didn't really have a question, but those were just my thoughts after hearing you all. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
And to your point, Senator Dr. Joseph Bowie has a bill that will need your support on. So it's Senate Bill 404, which will empower the school board to do their duties just as the other 63 parishes in our state are doing. And one of the questions from one of the legislators was, why isn't there anyone in New Orleans any elected official supporting his bill. They literally asked him that. So Troy Carter has now, given Dr. Bowie his support because he's admitted that what the intentions of what he voted for, it's not happening. And he's kind of switched gears to say that he wants to support it. So please look into Senate Bill 404 and do what you can to support Senator Dr. Joseph Bowie in his efforts to really unify our school district here in New Orleans.
Thank you, Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you. So I know a lot about the old education committee, as y'all probably can imagine. And I think it's important to kind of explain what it was and what it wasn't. I think, to your point, really the old education committee was meant to be a platform for people to come and talk about what's going on at schools, because that is something the council can provide, a platform in this chamber to have those conversations. It was a venue for collaboration if and when the school board wanted to collaborate, because they are an independent body and we can't really make them do anything. I want to kind of express what it wasn't. We don't control their millages. So I want people to realize that if we don't like what the school board is doing and you don't like the way they're spending the money, you still got to deal with the school board. We don't have an authority over their charter agreements, because as you said, there are a lot of people, a lot of parents who have some serious concerns about the charters their children are attending. We are not a chartering authority. So we can't tell charter what to do, what not to do. We do not have authority over hire and fire. My mom literally texted her. She goes, remind them, like, if you don't like the teacher or the principal, you can air what your concerns are in a platform where people can hear you and it can be amplified. But ultimately, we can't hire or fire anybody. And we don't have control over school board policy. Now, all that being said, like you said, and you have told it to my face on many occasions, we can provide a platform, and that's a place where people can come on a regular basis when there is a concern regarding a direction the schools are going in, or types of policies where you want to give parents a venue where they can come and have that conversation. And more importantly, there is an opportunity where if the council and school board are in disagreement, we can work towards having a collaborative solution. So I have staff pulling the old language from the education committee, and we're going to take a look at it and see what we can do with it. I do want to express that there are council members who already have chair two committees. So we're going to look at the council members that only have one and see if there's some interest in one of them chairing the committee if they already have one, because we want to make sure we spread leadership opportunities around and also give time, the proper time and consideration to someone who'd be over that committee. But we're going to pull the language and take a look at it and see how it can be modified based on the realities now. I'm pretty sure the education committee died after my mom left the council.
Yes.
So I think that we're going to look at the way it was and look at how we can restructure it.
Yeah. Go ahead. I was gonna say, yeah, we would love the language that your mother had in the original committee, but also we definitely want to add that piece. There's a lot of things you can't do, but the question becomes, who's the watchdog to make sure that our schools are legally compliant if the school board is not? Because I don't think that having a bunch of 501c3s, nonprofits that are not following state and federal law, like
I will tell you, legally speaking, the person who has authority would probably be the legislative auditor.
Well,
I mean, so if you're talking about lack of compliance with state and federal laws, there aren't local laws like ordinances governing schools. When you're talking about schools and preemption, it's all state and federal law. The authority that would govern that we have, outside of like federal authorities, the FBI and the like, and Department of Education, locally in the state, the two groups that would have authority over them and compliance would be the State Office of Inspector General and the State Legislative Auditor.
And I understand, and I'm saying that they already did a report saying that we have problems. So for us to just go in and say, to kind of monitor and just say, well, how can we help? Like what we were saying, how can we partner so that we won't have these constant, because it's constant. We constantly get called out for breaking the law, for not being in compliance, for being discriminatory. So, if it's one thing, our schools self-report, their self-reported data is horrifying. We know that as many suspensions as they report, there's 2/3 more that they're not. So just to check in whatever that looks like. And I'm just saying, as y'all look at the language, we would like to sit at the table and possibly talk about what language could be added in or just around some kind of monitoring outside, because if we was explaining, the school board doesn't want to monitor.
Right, because also with the language that your mother had, we've understand that now we are 100% charter. So the landscape of education here in New Orleans has changed. We also understand that, you know, you guys do not have authority over schools, of course, as we've been told the million times. But one of the things that we do need is a bully pulpit. We've seen just now, and you know, I guess your mother is the constant thread to this situation that we're dealing with now. We just seen what just happened at Homer Plessy in the French Quarter. That community allowed that situation to happen to get the public school board to back off of their previous direction that they wanted to do with closing the school. And that's all we really want is a bully pulpit. And sometimes we understand that embarrassment helps and it works. And if we can have the council backing and blessing on that, that would help the community in a huge manner.
No, I think, like I said, from my text with her, really the major purpose, because remember that committee was born post-Katrina. The purpose there was really to provide a platform for educators to come forward and kind of explain what their experience was dealing with the transformed schools. I think that that's something that's definitely within the council's purview as far as creating the platform, but I just want to set expectations. We do not have oversight over New Orleans public schools.
Which
Absolutely.
brings us back to the Senate bill.
Right.
So even if you don't have oversight over them, what Dr. Bowie is proposing helps to address a lot of those what you can't do pillars. And so that if we could get you guys to support Dr. Bowie, that will go a long way to getting what he's asking for implemented in our school system. So a lot of these questions around all of these inequities we're talking about could be addressed from a legislative standpoint.
And I think it's worth mentioning that the legislative auditor is a body that has oversight over the schools. But we've had several conversations with the person who heads that department. And what he made clear to us was as hard as they work to uncover some of it, his office is comprised of, I think, less than 24 people, and they're responsible for the entire state of Louisiana. So small things, or what they seem to be smaller to them, slips through the cracks. And so that's why a standalone education committee is important, because he was saying even if he had people in each parish that would be able to assist the legislative auditor's office or to bring them the information and say, here's where we need you to look. But if it's incumbent upon just his office to do it, then most likely it won't get done.
No, I mean, I think legislative auditor is very similar to the ethics board in that they don't typically randomly uncover
Right.
issues.
Right.
They really rely upon third parties to say, this is the issue. Particularly with the legislative auditor, you say, this is the issue to a legislator who then goes to auditor and say, this is the specific issue I want you to investigate. So I think that you're 100% right. They don't actively look at the books of anybody because their office isn't staffed to that degree, but that's something we can definitely talk about offline.
All right, at this time, we'll take any other comments or questions. Ms. Angela Kinlaw.
Good morning, everyone. Particular morning to all of the members of the community that are here giving this presentation today. We're so grateful. Just wanted to go on record as supporting this request for a standalone committee focused on education, and wanted to just name the great opportunities that it provides. I wanted to ask members of the council if you really understand how deeply important this opportunity could be, because we're thinking back to when there was a $4.6 million allocation to New Orleans public schools. Do you guys remember that? There was a $4.6 million allocation to New Orleans public schools for education funding that came from the city of New Orleans to the New Orleans public schools. And so when there's money being allocated to the public schools, it feels really important that the city council has the opportunity to ensure that those dollars are proactively going to where they're being designated to go. A committee like this could give great opportunity to make sure that those dollars are being used in the manner in which they were supposed to be used. I'm also thinking very much about how Harrah's has funding that they give that could be used proactively to support a lot of what the community is demanding in terms of resources for our children. And so we never get an opportunity to hear how those dollars and cents are being used. And I just wanted to name a couple of quick things. Some of us had attended in community some of these meetings that the school district was having about these surplus buildings. And I want to just name that it's really important that the community is being heard across the board, because those buildings sit in your districts. You know, there are buildings that are sitting in the districts that are being shuffled around, and the children are being shuffled around in between them, and no one's giving account for that. But this legislative body puts forth a lot of laws and legislation that can result in the criminalization of our children when those things are not proactively addressed. So through this committee, there could be an opportunity to say, how do we proactively ensure that our children are getting what they need, rather than just simply being a legislative body that says, hey, folks are wilding out, so we want to go ahead and put some laws on the books to throw people in jail, when they are actually not wilding out. They're actually responding the way any human being would respond when their communities are being deprived. So I want to again just say that I support this committee wholeheartedly. It's an opportunity for a community to honor and recognize the kind of things that have been spoken about. And we often have heard this past week about how things have been slipping through the cracks. So we want to prevent that. And definitely would love to hear, as you're just naming, what those specific next steps are for the implementation of that committee.
Thank you, Ms. Kinlaw. Any online? No online comments, no comments from the dais. Thank you for the presentation. I think you heard loud and clear from the dais that there's definitely interest and need in what you're asking. So you allow us to discuss it amongst ourselves as a council, and definitely get back with you in a timely fashion to let you know the next steps going forward. All right. Any other comments, Dr. Y? I see you.
No, I just wanted to say thank you.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
That's it. All right. All right, at this time, make a motion to adjourn. Second by Councilmember Harris. 5 yeas, no nays, motion is adjourned. Thank you.